Algebra 2, this is Chapter 6, Section 3. I'm going to have 2 videos for this. This first video is going to have and 2 examples to it, and then I'll have a second video. So the zero product property means that when you multiply 2 numbers together, A and B, and you get 0, one of those 2 things has to be 0. The only way to get to 0 is by multiplying by 0. So you know that if you take 9 and you multiply it times x and you get 0, that x has to be 0. Likewise, if we take 2 binomials and we're multiplying them together and you end up with 0, then either this first binomial, x plus 5, has to be 0, or this second binomial, x minus 7, has to be 0. That then lets you solve it. So if x plus 5 is equal to 0, then x would be equal to negative 5. And if x minus 7 is equal to 0, then x would be equal to 7. And you might have 2 answers. You would have to plug them back into the original equation to see if they both worked. In this case, if we put a negative 5 here, that would be negative 5 plus 5 would be 0. 0 times anything would be 0. That would work. 7, if we plug the 7 in over here, then 7 minus 7 would be 0, and 0 times anything would give you 0. So that would work. So with that in mind, that's how we're going to go about solving these next problems. So if I've got x squared is equal to negative 4x, the very first step is going to be to move everything to the same side of the equal sign and set it equal to 0. So to move this to the other side, I'm going to add 4x to both sides. They are not like terms, so I end up with x squared plus 4x equal to 0. Then I have to factor. You're always going, well, what am I going to use factoring for? We're there. This is what we use factoring for. So they have in common x. So I'm going to take out an x and write this as x plus 4, and that's going to be equal to 0. And if I were to distribute this x, I would get back to exactly what I started with. So I know from my zero product property that if I multiply 2 things together and end up with 0, then either this x would be equal to 0, or this x plus 4 would have to be equal to 0. And then I can solve. Well, x is equal to 0, that's done. To get x by itself over here, I'd subtract 4 from both sides. So x would be equal to 4. And both of these should work. And if we substitute 0 back into our original equation, 0 squared is 0 equals negative 4 times 0 is 0. 0 equals 0. That does in fact work. And let's try this 4. Okay, so if I put 4 in here, 4 squared would be 16. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing my negative sign. That's what's odd to me. 4 squared would be 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 would also give you a 16. So 16 would be equal to 16. That one works. And 0 would be equal to 0. That one works for the red one. So both of these would be the answer. And so your answer would contain two numbers. Which means, back to our original thought of parabolas, that means that we would have a parabola and A would be positive, so it's going to be facing up, and one of the zeros is at 0, one of the zeros is at negative 4. You know it's facing up, so you have a parabola going through there. And that would be a very quick sketch of it by finding the zeros or the solutions. So number 8, let's look at number 8 here on my slides. This is the other example. So we have this big thing. Again, first step, get all the stuff on one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 9 here. I'm going to add 9 over here. And you get x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. From there, you're going to factor. It's a trinomial, so that means you're going to break it up into 2 binomials. And if you forget, you can do the x, where we've got 2 numbers that multiply to get you 9 and add to get you a negative 6. So I know 3 times 3 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6, so this is going to be a negative 3 and a negative 3. 2 negatives make this positive 9, negative and negative make this negative 6. So this is going to be minus 3, and this is going to be minus 3. They are the same number. Notice that. So we go back to our zero product property, and we know that x minus 3 is going to be equal to 0, or x minus 3 is going to be equal to 0. In each case, x is equal to 3, which means we've got one solution. And again, what does one solution look like? Well, that's going to be a parabola. The a is positive. Okay, so we're going to have a parabola. The a is positive. Our root is 3. We've got one root at 3, and it's going to go up from there. So that's a very quick sketch of what this equation right here looks like. One root, we touch the x-axis at one point, and a is positive, so it is facing up.